This is Progressive Insider.
Yeah, Progressive Insider, you know they wiser. Ooh, this that new media company covering everything. I'm talking that news you ain't heard of, cause you know it's getting buried. Social justice, yeah, the stuff you need to know about. Fucking politics that the corporate news won't cover. You know they don't think that you could see under, but you can now, cause the people we cover, they may not be famous, but their stories should be heard. Yeah, every voice matters. We should rise and fall together.
Meeting is now streaming live.
Nice.
This is working. Yay. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
And we have Andy, the land shark.
That's right. Fins up.
Good morning, Andy.
Good morning. How are you? How is it going?
Good. Allergies this morning. Allergies.
Oh.
So I sneezed.
Nature's way of telling you we're waking up.
Right, exactly. Stupid trees. Stupid trees. So yeah, it's just been one of those more it's Monday take 3.
You should live in Brazil. They don't like trees there.
No, but they got all the smoke from burning the trees. So
okay, we have to take the good with the bad, I guess.
Yeah. There's nowhere to go. Nowhere. So I'm just checking our stream to make sure that we are good.
All right.
But
look at Hair of the Dog embracing technology.
Barely, but yeah.
Kind of a long arm ass out hug. You know.
Right.
Okay, everybody's caffeinated.
Yeah, hey everybody, good morning and welcome to Ron Kuby. Now that I can say it properly, good morning.
Good morning.
I want to share the your website with everybody because first it's cracking me up to no end. And I want to get this on a poster because it's just so eloquent. Let me see if I can pull this up here. Here it is. All right. So just from your website, I love the way that this is written out. Opposing federal and state government as they come up with creative new ways to disproportionately punish people living outside of the law because of their political beliefs, race, class, immigration status, creative impulses, and perceived deviance. Holy cow. The fight never ends.
Trying to have a large client base.
Like
it's important.
Right, exactly.
Who doesn't like a great run-on sentence?
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Grammar Guy in your Land Shark t-shirt. Right.
Everybody's a critic. So, but thank you for joining us this morning while you're sheltering in place in New York. Yeah. So are you working from home or are you being defiant and going into an office?
Well, I do have an office and I'm the only one going in, and I'm in New York City. And so my office is close by. So I walk to my office with my dog, spend a little time in the office after properly sterilizing, try to do some work there, do some work from home. But the truth is, since the courts in New York are largely shut down, and our wonderful progressive governor Cuomo, who everybody loves, who's exercising great leadership and worshiping, his blah-de-blah. One of the things that he did was he suspended all the deadlines in the criminal procedure law. And without getting all technical about it, what that basically means is if you are currently incarcerated, nothing is happening in your case until such time as those deadlines are reinstated. So if you are incarcerated, you will stay incarcerated unless acted upon by a greater and opposing force. And there are no greater and opposing forces because the courts are not even accepting filings in most cases. Yay!
That's amazing.
Governor Cuomo.
Oh my God. So
And you thought he was too busy cutting Medicaid.
Yeah, and apparently in the current budget, without going again into the details of how New York actually makes its laws, because it's pretty ugly, but he has put in the budget apparently his program to reverse the bail reform that we've been fighting for 36 years. And that's still in his proposed budget. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
well, okay, so explain this a little bit more. He's trying to reverse the efforts at bail reform?
Yeah, what happened was after a lot of struggle over decades and decades, New York finally instituted relatively radical bail reform. And it was relatively radical because it took whole classes of cases, whole classes of offenses, and said that in all of these cases, these defendants must be released either on their own recognizance or upon conditions, but you cannot impose a cash bail. And what that did was create a predictable backlash from the right wing and Mr. and Mrs. Law and Order and the police and the whole carceral state apparatus, because people, like there was one case, for example, and every day there was a new headline about this until the coronavirus took over. You know, one guy had been arrested 142 times for theft of services for turnstile jumping, going back to the 1980s, and he was released without bail. And the right wing said this is an example of why we have to have carceral bail. And we were saying, all right, well, what about the 100 and something times before reform was passed? Like, they didn't do anything then. Why do we think incarcerating this guy for a couple of days now is going to change anything? And then there was a big cry to allow judges to be judges. Like, let judges make individualized determinations, really based on their subjective impression of whether a person was likely to reoffend. And guess who is perceived as most likely to reoffend? The nice white kid with his parents in the courtroom in his suit and tie, or the poor black kid
Right.
who was turnstile jumping? Yeah.
Right.
So we got rid of that.
We're trying to do
And
that.
now they want to roll the clock back on it.
I
That's
don't think I could even jump 142 times.
right. Give them credit for that at least. So this is what they have deemed as a hardened criminal that's a threat to society, right?
Well, not a hardened criminal, but somebody who continues to reoffend. And the truth is, they will continue to reoffend if you are, nobody rides them anymore. But if you're poor in normal times, you're going to be committing crimes that are related to poverty. You're going to engage in turnstile jumping. You're going to engage in aggressive panhandling. You're going to be doing, engaging in petty thefts and shoplifting and stuff like that. It's just going to happen. So instead of addressing the actual cause of these offenses, the idea was to become increasingly punitive and increasingly carceral. So that's what we had for a long time. January 1st, the law changed, hue and cry. Now they want to walk it back, and we'll see how that's going. That's what's going on actually today in the New York City criminal justice system, because not much else is going on.
It reminds me, we had introduced a guy and interviewed a guy from Kansas City. And one of the things that struck me in his interview was he was talking about how Kansas City had made public transport free, because the way they argued it is you've already paid for it, right? Through federal and taxes, federal and state taxes and everything that you do. And it just would save the city money to have people with free transportation to get to and from work and shops and things like this. New York hasn't even considered this, that maybe public transport is a public good.
It might disproportionately help people of color.
Well, yeah, there's that, and we can't certainly have that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly you could configure. Right. Kerry, we're starting to lose the signal here.
Yeah, I'm wondering when your daughter woke up, did she jump on your internet? Because it looks like your signal stream is going down.
She did jump on our internet. Yeah. Honey, do you have to be online? We'll see how
There's
that goes.
a loaded question.
She's gonna get twitchy in about 5 minutes. So.
Well, she works as a public defender in Brooklyn. So she's working from home now. She was one of the last ones out of the courthouse before they started closing it down. So of course she and her colleagues all have COVID.
Oh, geez. So
they're young and strong.
Very good. She went into the family business then. She couldn't but help.
Somewhat different. She's, as a public defender, she represents exclusively poor people, and she doesn't make choices about what cases to take and what cases not to take. Probably my most vivid, if you want to encapsulate the differences between us, last year, my wife was going down to Washington, D.C. to protest the Kavanaugh nomination. Mm-hmm. And my daughter was in law school in Washington, D.C. And so I texted her. I said, great, if Mama gets arrested, you can represent her. Which, I thought it was really kind of adorable.
Right.
And
they could drive together?
Yeah. And she texted back, I only represent poor people.
Oh, she's gonna leave Mom in jail. No, I'm sorry.
Mama can buy her own freaking lawyer. Yeah. Here's Mama now. Coming down. Mama's coming down the steps.
Awesome. We can get the whole family. So, okay, let me ask you a question. So I was doing homework, and I was watching the show Ronald from Starz.
Yeah.
Okay, and I got mad because my only critique of it is actually the entire point of the show. So for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's this series on Starz about our criminal justice system. And you made a point, I'm going to get this quote wrong, that our justice system is not necessarily about fairness, justice being blind. It's about being finished. Right. So that you get these dockets done and everything's. And so what tends to happen is these wrongful convictions or coercing people to plea as they might not normally do. But the thing that made me mad, and of course, I'm yelling at the TV. It was you and a former state's attorney, a professional. There was, I think, a retired police officer, detective.
He's always productive, yelling at the television.
Right. So you had like this dream team assembled to review these cases. And in my head, I'm thinking, nobody can afford that, but that's not true. Some people can afford that. And that was the whole point of the show. You said you can't buy justice, but you can rent it.
Sounds like something I'd say. That's good.
Yeah. And that's just, it made me mad because here in Illinois, we had a Supreme Court justice candidate for the first time in state history. Not only was he running as a Democrat, because usually you don't name your party affiliation, but he was running as a progressive reformer. And he was going around the entire state saying, hey, did you know that our court gets paid based on number of convictions? What do you think that does for us? And that was something I didn't know. I didn't know that we were funding based on the number of people we convict, put in jail, put in prison, all of those things. So it really called out your point that they just want to be done. You are just a docket number and be done. So what do we do for that? Anything? I mean,
I think a lot of things that are being done about that and have been done really in the past generation, ever since the advent of the Innocence Project and DNA testing, which has repeatedly shown defendants, including defendants on death row, to be innocent. I think there's much more of a movement now to re-examine older cases, go back and excavate them, and a more receptiveness on the part of district attorneys and particularly judges to re-examine evidence from the past or to take a look at new evidence that's been discovered. There's been statutory changes around the country to permit that. There's been case law that increasingly permits that. So I think that part of it is being done. I mean, the problem, I mean, I know Wrong Man is a fun show, and it's interesting because it really does raise questions. Did this person do it? And you can debate that at home. But the problem with actual innocence cases is they are the exception in the criminal justice system. I tell you a little secret here. Most people who are convicted of crimes did it. I know. Don't tell anybody I said that. And I know your tens and tens of viewers are going to pass this along, but try to keep it on the down low. And that's what the system cares about. Did you do it? And most of my clients did it. But that's not the question we should be focusing on. The questions we need to focus on are, is this community being over-policed? Are these folks being overcharged, over-criminalized, over-punished? Should it even be a crime under the circumstances? All of those kinds of issues that the criminal justice system is not designed to address. The criminal justice system just wants to know, did you do it? And if you did, what's the appropriate punishment under the circumstances? And the danger of actual innocence cases, although I've done a bunch and I continue to do them, the danger is you shouldn't be out there looking for innocence. You should be out there defending people against the system that's systematically designed to criminalize and incarcerate them and try to change that system as best you can, whether it's a more systemic change on a policy level, because most folks did it.
That's interesting. Okay, so we need to change our mindset about the legal system in particular, but the majority of your career, correct me if I'm wrong, is all about protecting civil rights. So when you have somebody, a client who did it, your primary focus then is on what's suitable for punishment. Is that what?
No, actually, because I'm a small private firm, we tend to have the luxury of aggressively litigating cases, and we're able to put resources into the cases, even for people who are poor, because we have a relatively small client base as opposed to public defenders who may have 90 or 100 or 120 cases at one time. As a result of that, I'm able to be annoying enough to enough people that eventually they decide, in many cases, that my clients just aren't worth the resources it takes to put them behind bars. For the more serious cases, I really just sort of function as, think of me as a legal version of a needle exchange program, right? It's all about harm reduction. Right? Hi, use me. You're still going to have your underlying problems, but at least you won't get Hep C and AIDS, probably.
Oh, that is the ultimate marketing campaign right there.
Hi.
Or your needle exchange program, needle systems.
We're all about harm reduction here. Because oftentimes in the criminal justice system, harm reduction is the best you can do. You can get somebody probation instead of time. You can get somebody 5 years instead of 25 years, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Kerry, I just saw that ad in my head while watching Law and Order SVU.
Right. Exactly. It would be perfect.
I was on that show. I still get residuals from that show.
Okay, what episode?
Oh.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Where I gotta go find it now. What
Did you play yourself?
Yes, in that show, it was what I call the greatest 15 seconds in television history. Unless you had a widescreen, in which case you only saw my hair, but you got to hear my voice.
Oh.
I was representing a corrupt Latino politician in New York. I forget the name of the episode, but fast forward to the 58.5-minute mark and you'll catch me. Yeah.
IMDb. Everybody go to IMDb right now.
I need those residuals. Yeah, you get these checks in. The great thing about unions, as you probably know, among other things, SAG-AFTRA is a particularly aggressive union. So you're always getting your residuals. And you know, I get a check for 8 cents.
Oh, well, let's do it.
It's literally not worth the paper it's written on.
Or it's certainly not worth the stamp it took to send it.
Yeah, we could totally help you out there, and we can get our tens of viewers to go. Yeah, no, that's perfect. Okay, so your best stories, like you don't have to name your clients or who your the opposing counsel was, but behind the scenes stuff that we may not know, like deals and things that are made, maybe some quirky things. You've been at the forefront of a whole lot of fights. Like, and before we started recording, I mentioned to you how nervous I was because I knew of you, and through my entire lifetime, anytime there was a major headline with a case or a question about civil rights, you're involved in it, right? So I'm going through all of it. So I actually got a little nervous because just everything in my entire life.
Because I am so utterly awesome that it's really hard to figure out you're sitting right here with me. And I take it that feeling has passed.
Just a little.
Good. We've moved on beyond that, yeah.
Right, the myth is gone. Now we have the reality. It's fine. So looking back on your illustrious career, what are your favorite moments then?
You know, it's hard to pick favorite moments. Let's see. I mean, for this audience, I think one of the most fun moments was it was just a little demonstration case after Gulf War I, although we didn't call it that then because we didn't know there would be a. Yeah, we just called it the Gulf War. Now you got to specify. And I was representing a bunch of anti-war protesters, and they all got arrested for civil disobedience. We walk into court, and the judge who was sitting on the bench was a former judge advocate general in the United States Army.
Oh, no.
Oh.
And so he didn't really like the anti-war protesters and all of their scruffiness. And they all came into court wearing buttons. And the judge looks at me and says, "Mr. Kuby, are your clients wearing buttons?" I said, "Yes, Judge, they are." And then he demonstrated why you don't ask a question unless you know the answer. He said, "What do the buttons say?" And I looked at my clients and I looked at the judge and I said, "They say, 'Fuck the U.S. war machine, Your Honor.'" So that was fun.
I can just picture his response.
I couldn't yell at me for it. He asked me the question. I was an accurate reporter, so that was always that was a fun in-court moment. We tend not to have a lot of fun in-court moments. The criminal justice system really is not set up to deliver the funny.
No, it's really not, especially when you're looking at fighting.
Yeah.
So I can imagine. So now
it's usually the murder cases make for a tough room.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. Well, okay, so the war protesters, now you said scruffy. Now our war protesters are grandmas. They're Code Pink ladies, right? We saw them.
Yeah, but when I was representing them, they were young and scruffy.
So now they're just older and.
Now we're old, but we're still doing the same thing, young lady.
That's right. Just a lot slower.
Actually, when we were watching Max Blumenthal and the gray zone. They had reporters out in DC at the Venezuela embassy, and those grandmas, I would not mess with them. They were easily 70, 80, but they were holding their own. To outside.
Yeah, we have that contingent in New York, the raging grannies. It's always nice to see them at various things. Yeah. I just remember them when they were young.
And they carry those canes and walkers, and they get swinging them around like Bruce Lee with a set of nunchucks. You have to really be out of range.
Let's not be mocking the old. They don't have much time left.
Oh God. Well, as we wake up today, none of us do. So looking at from your perspective as a civil rights advocate, now we have this global pandemic, and we're starting to see we've got the shelter in place and all of these things, and it's kind of like, I know that I am and other people are waiting to see how far are we actually going to go to give up civil liberties for under the guise of protection, right? Because I'm thinking of like the Patriot Act that expired yesterday. So in your purview.
Well, the good news is in both New York and Pennsylvania, gun stores are deemed essential services. So whatever else we lose, we ain't gonna lose our guns.
And alcohol.
Alcohol, of course. So, what can go wrong with everybody staying at home with guns and booze? I think it's a perfect prescription for security. On a more serious level, I come from a legal background where some of the most significant figures in my life were public health epidemiologists, people who did AIDS pioneering and AIDS treatment pioneering. And the truth is, something we're just beginning to realize, but I've known for a while, is that when you're dealing with public health crises, state power is really at its maximum, and things that would be absolutely prohibited in normal times, like arresting a pastor for having church services and dragging him out in handcuffs, those kinds of things, do happen. And this is not, though, some sort of perceived crisis or cooked up scenario designed to deprive us of our civil liberties. This is an actual, real, ongoing health crisis, in which thousands and thousands of people are dying, over 1,000 in New York City as of right now. And the hand of the state, even under those circumstances, rests fairly lightly. Mm-hmm. That is to say, I can get up and I can walk to my office. Nobody's going to arrest me. I can't, join a pickup basketball game. But you know what? I never could. I'm a crappy basketball player. Groceries are being delivered. There's not people are not prowling the streets, shooting it out with the police who are, trying to quarantine us. They haven't set up 50 caliber machine guns at the New Jersey side of the Holland Tunnel, as in the Stand. I mean, I think that most leadership around the country, putting aside the head leadership, but at the state level, most people are acting very responsibly. They're taking it seriously, some sooner, some later. And I don't see any sort of significant permanent loss of civil liberties in the United States based on this. And I mean, the thing that's most deeply disturbing to me is that the people who have already lost most of their civil liberties, pretrial detainees and persons behind bars, of which we have in total in New York State about 40,000 or so, they have no recourse to the courts anymore as a general matter, not because the heavy hand of the state has shut down the courts, but because the courts themselves have decided better safe than sorry. Which means that the judges aren't there, they're at home. We have a technological base that was, designed. I don't know if you remember Princess phones as the latest technology. I don't know, you
yes.
look it up. Your young people can Google it. Basically, the technology that we have in the New York State court system was new around the time the Princess phone came out. I mean, for example, in New York City, in the criminal courts, we have no e-filing. That is, all documents that are filed have to be filed with paper copies, filed in the clerk's office, paper served on opposing counsel. Yeah, right?
I live in a county that is mostly rural, and we have e-filing. Holy cow.
Yeah. No, I get that. And there's a lot of like institutional reasons why we don't have that, mostly based on the fact that individual judges run their own little fiefdoms, and most of them are old and they never really learned how to do this. And look, like as an old person, I was kind of forced to learn to do much of this because that's where things are going. But if you're a judge, being a judge means you're not forced to do anything. So if you wanted to, there are some younger judges that do permit you to conduct transactions online by sending PDFs, but those don't take the place of actual paper filings, which these days are simply impossible. I mean, nobody's going to their office to churn out copies and lick stamps and do all that other,
So
what's that, Andy? Hey, I'm sorry, Andy.
Doorknobs, right?
What'd you say, dude?
You can't lick doorknobs either, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. It's a real shame.
So we're seeing states that are releasing those that have been incarcerated, not necessarily from maximum, but from jails, right? Low, what we consider low level offenders, so if you have a client right now who's got a case pending, what can you do? Anything? You're just
for the people who are in the category of pretrial detainees, they have not yet come to trial. Some of those individuals are being released, not very many. And the mayor is working in conjunction with the district attorneys in New York City to identify those people that prosecutors think can be released safely. Newsflash. These folks, the prosecutors have already put these people behind bars pending trial. So by definition, the category of people who DAs, who prosecutors think can be safely released, is going to be a very, very small group of people. I mean, maybe talk to defense lawyers or social workers or case managers or other people to get a fuller sense. Statewide, Governor Cuomo has done nothing. And there are many, many things he could do, again, without getting into all the technicalities. There are many people who are released, are essentially have been granted parole, but haven't been released yet. There's usually a 6-week period while the probation departments do home visits to make sure they're being released into acceptable housing that's not filled with criminals. Well, they're not doing many home visits. Duh. And these folks are just sitting. I mean, the government has said, you can go free, you can walk among us, but they remain in jail, in prison rather, being exposed to COVID-19 for essentially a bureaucratic reason. There are also hundreds and hundreds of prisoners who have been convicted of serious crimes, but are coming up to their conditional release date. So let's say you've done 15 years of a 16-year sentence. Just maybe you can be released. That another year is not going to do anything to you or for you that 15 years hasn't done. But again, Mr. and Mrs. Law and Order don't want that to happen. The governor has never been good on those issues. And, it's going to remain a problem until Mr. Convicted Criminal gets a ventilator that grandma can't get because Mr. Convicted Criminal got it first.
Do you think that's realistic, though, that Mr. Convicted Criminal is actually going to get the ventilator, though?
Some of them. Some of them are. Some of them aren't.
So
but
now,
I mean, it can't be like the jail scene in, again, my favorite apocalypse movie, although I watch them all. It can't be like the jail scene in The Stand, where everybody is left to die and you're saving your last dead rat.
right, exactly. So this is where we could be looking at, well, on the other side of this pandemic, we could be looking at a wave of civil rights violations coming forward, these petitions, because if you have people incarcerated and then you knowingly put them at greater risk, because like you said, New York, you've got to file everything by paper, but now you can't. Nobody's on the phone doing things. So you have, because of an antiquated system or politics or whatever else, knowingly put people at risk who should not have been. So that could be like the cruel and unusual, or whatever definition. I'm not a lawyer, but
yeah, no, you got the right. You're in the right area. You got the right amendment. I mean, the short answer to filing civil suits after, like, people die to get some money for their family, I mean, maybe, but there's a lot of procedural bars to doing that, especially in an emergency, especially when it comes to prisons. The idea now is to file as many individual writs or small group actions as possible to get some people out of jail now, but it's very, very hard to deal with the state prison system. And that's where the majority of people are locked up. And of course, basic things like social distancing are impossible. Prisoners are not permitted to have hand sanitizer because they're afraid they're going to drink it. You know, some probably will, but still, come on.
Well, I'm not gonna lie. I made my hand sanitizer with Everclear because I wanted just.
Yeah, right. Robert Earl Keen. Nothing wrong with Everclear.
Right. So.
All right. So we're gonna wrap up soon.
Yes. I'm gonna let you go. We're gonna let you go. So, thank you so much, Andy. Any last questions, comments, critiques for Mr. Ron?
Well, I agree with a lot of what you said. I just think the optics of letting hardened criminals that have been convicted of, serious crimes like marijuana possession is a real mistake.
Well, the truth is, and again, I don't want to spread this around, but the, guy behind bars serving time for simple marijuana possession, that individual is largely mythological at this point. We are talking about people who have engaged in what most of us would consider to be serious offenses involving, legitimate danger to other human beings who did not deserve to be endangered. And I think we need to grapple with the issue of violence as a society and make a decision as to whether our current model of endless incarceration, double-digit sentences, 25 to life, and continued parole denials is the best way to address that. Most of the social science out there says it is not, but we're not talking about people who have sold weed, in their college dorm or, on the street to their colleagues and are now like serving a bunch of time behind bars. That's not what's happening. Well, I will say this, the Warrant Squad in New York City was out this weekend busting down doors and dragging people into court because they missed a court date for marijuana offenses.
That's money. That's what?
No, it's not money. It's just stupid. It's like, here's the Warrant Squad. What do? We arrest people on warrants. Nobody's told us to stop. So they go in. They drag these people out of the homes. Everybody's now exposing everybody to COVID-19. They drag them to a holding cell. Again, more exposure and cross-contamination. They finally show up before a judge on video conference, and the judge releases them on their own recognizance. Lather, rinse, repeat. But that's not some massive conspiracy. That's just like stupid, bureaucratic, et cetera, et cetera. Never ascribe to malice what stupidity alone will explain, comrades.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Ron, so much for joining us this morning, having coffee with us, and really appreciate your input. So,
well, thank you so much. I enjoy, and remember, if you're looking for things to binge watch, and you like true crime shows, Wrong Man, available on Starz, season 1 and season 2. Each season, there are 6 episodes, 3 cases, and 1 question. Wrong Man.
Absolutely. And much better than Tiger King. I have to say that.
I don't know. I haven't seen Tiger King.
Don't.
But I will say, since Tiger King doesn't have me in it and Wrong Man does, I'm probably going to like Wrong Man more.
Probably.
All right. Take care, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
Right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow. Yeah, there were some roller coaster things in there that I enjoyed his commentary, but I'm not sure if I feel better or worse after hearing the reality. And that's how I felt watching that show last night. I'm like, well, this is great. It's entertaining, but we're so screwed because who can afford that? When we live in a country that $400 or $500 emergency per month is too much for the average household. And now you have this super legal team that clearly is at least $100,000.
Yeah.
Wow.
An hour.
Yeah. So I'm like, my own lawyer who was very nice, charged $400 an hour. And then to be nice, he would give me one of his junior associates who was only $250 an hour.
To be nice, niceness was another 50, so that would be $450 now.
Right. So it's overwhelming when we look at our health system. Obviously, everybody's like, geez, maybe Medicare for all is a good idea. And then when we start building in justice reform on top of it, right? So there are opportunities.
Well, then the more news that I absorb in these strange times, the more I'm enjoying my solitude.
You know what? Because you can tune out. I do miss hanging out with friends and having these conversations live. However, because there's really nobody else, I can't get the cork off the wine bottle. I'm gonna be honest. I can't do it. So I have friends that do this for me, and they're probably watching now going, that's true statement. But I do appreciate having these quiet moments where I can tune everything out, and there's no expectation of being there. So
it's the little moments that you can distract yourself, right? Because I did that, honestly, the first, say, week to week and a half of ingesting as much news as possible to be as ready for the onslaught. And quite honestly, I newsed myself into a depression by doing it. You know, the onslaught of bad news and bad news and bad news and bad news. It was like, oh, we're fucked. I'm going to go sit in the closet for 3 weeks. So it's just now it's kind of like, okay, well, how can I distract myself for an hour and a half and not think about it? And then I'll come back to the depression when I'm done. But at least I had that hour and a half break. Right.
True. And I think to your point, we do have to do part of self-care is limiting your exposure, what you consume in the news media and things like that. So
right.
Yeah. So what was it? I think it was yesterday. I don't know. The days are all starting to run together, but Don had talked about a gentleman who's got the Good News Network where you can just, if you need an infusion, go and look at happy stories and the positive stories that are coming out of this. Because, when we had Kay on talking about the silver lining in this, those are some of the things that we can focus on. But
we're going to find that, right? People find inner strength in these situations, and you end up going the extra mile for your neighbors and your friends. And I was kind of hoping to, if you don't mind me telling about the thing that happened to Deb last night.
No, please go ahead, please.
Yeah, because as some of you may remember, that the story I've told, that she's a permanent resident now of our trailer in the driveway. And to see Deb, we have what we call the SDP out here behind the garage, called the social distance patio. And so it's long enough that you can safely sit at either end. So my wife will text me the keyword, and I will text it back, and then we will meet for an impromptu smoke break on our back deck together, right? So that's the only contact that I have with my wife. Well, yesterday, and my daughter knew this was happening. I was completely left in the dark, and it was a complete surprise to Deb. But one of her coworkers, who was on maternity leave, when all this happened, of course, she's not coming back, she has small children, they made some handmade signs, and they came out to the house, and they placed these 3 signs in the driveway. And one was a message to Deb about thank you for keeping us safe, and a big heart on another one, and you rock on the other one. And they dropped off a care package on her doorstep, and then they left, right? And so then my daughter, messaged her to come out of the trailer and see what'd be left. Of course, she was in tears. She's absolutely, thrilled by that. It just made her day. And it's such a great example of the things that we can do for one another to get through these times, right? It's that human beings, this is why such an affront to us right now, is because human beings are social creatures. We have to interact with another. There's very, very few people that don't. And so the fact that we're now stuck in our homes and we're trying to reach out on social media and call one another, but we can't actually get together, is really a hard thing to get through. And in itself, on top of all the bad news and the sickness and everything else that's happening. So we've got to find these little ways of making it through this and keeping our sanity intact. And I just absolutely thrilled that this lady was able to come out and do this for Deb, and show her that she matters, and that her efforts are being noticed. And
really nice. You bring up such an excellent point, and I am so happy that somebody was thoughtful enough to do that for her. Yeah. And we can emulate that. So one of the things that happened here in Illinois is we had a statewide alert go out. Because they're trying to get people who are registered clinicians, particularly nurses, to sign up on the statewide thing. So if they have to build a hospital in Grant Park, they could staff it appropriately. But what if we did, for these same nurses, doctors, CNAs, all of these things, what if we had like a pen pal system where we could, post them a message, hey, thinking about you today, I hope you're okay, right? There are millions of us sitting around who could, get a note to somebody. Like, I might not personally know a nurse here, but connect me to them. And sure. I'm happy to sign hey, I really appreciate what you're doing. Hang in there, because there are few other fields where you have people who are ingrained with a selflessness the way you have with healthcare workers.
Right? Exactly. When you think about healthcare workers, why do they do what they do, right? It's, I would say doctors, because of the importance that are attached to that job, and the amount of schooling it takes, and the amount of money that it costs, and all that, is maybe a slightly different entity, but they still, it's doctors' credos, do no harm, right? And everyone in the industry, I would say, they go into nursing because of a call to help people, right? It's too bad our political system didn't work the same way.
But excellent point. It's in theory supposed to. It's civil service, right? And we have people who have made it a career rather than the whole idea behind a representative here in the United States. If you're a representative in Congress, you are the person who would gather the hopes and concerns of your community, and you would go off to the people's house in DC and you would negotiate and fight and make deals that would benefit your people. And then you come home and you go back to your regular life and we send someone else. That's not how it happens now. And I think we've lost sight of the civil service part of politics, what it was supposed to be.
Right.
Yeah, good point.
Yes. The people that are called politician, the idea of serving the people, right? The idea of being called a public servant. There's just a minuscule amount now that can actually be called that. Right? They should actually make a distinction between public servant and corporate servant. Right?
Well, okay, so this point came up yesterday. I wrote an article about this time last year in Chicago. Well, in Illinois, across the state, we have a ban in the legislature from talking about talking about rent control. So it's a ban on talking about even lifting, rent control issues. So some of those politicians who voted no just to lift the ban, not even to talk about rent control, but just to lift the ban on the conversation, got reelected. And so here's the consequence of that decision, right?
Don't make me call the thought police on you.
Well, because we have this ban, now we have our governor saying, yeah, other states have put a freeze on your rent. I can't, because in this state, we have a ban on even having a conversation about your rents. So elections have consequences. Yeah.
So the next step is have a ban on thinking about having a conversation about having it, right?
I bet you that could get passed here. I bet you it would be one of the first things.
And then here we go with Minority Report all over again.
That's exactly right. All right, Mr. Andy, I'm done. I got nothing else. You got anything you want to talk about?
I was gonna kind of hoping about talking, but it's too long a conversation now, and I ran out of coffee 10 minutes ago. So I would say that on Friday, I am going to take a little bit of time, and I'm going to bring some visual aids, and I'm going to demonstrate the proper procedure for putting on and removing proper protective gear for what the medical profession people have with the masks and shields and gloves, and the proper way to take them off, right? Because people are doing it wrong. Every time I see it, I see them doing it incorrectly, and it defeats the purpose of having them if they're not removed correctly.
Oh, I think that's a brilliant idea. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, let's do it.
Yes, so that'll be Friday, and I may still, if the story still has legs, I may get into a little bit of a rant with the current AOC controversy with Politico and different pseudo progressive pretend leftists that are jumping all over this and trying to do this for clickbait, but that'll be Friday.
Okay, so we'll do a clickbait alert, and then
yes.
you can instruct everyone on proper aseptic technique with this equipment that none of us have been trained on aside from. Okay, perfect. I love it. So, all right. Well, Andy, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, you have a good day, and everyone else who's watching, thank you. And please like and share these videos and support independent progressive media. And we'll keep doing what we're doing here. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
This is Progressive Insider.
Yeah. Progressive Insider, you know they wiser. This that new media company covering everything. I'm talking that news you ain't heard of, cause you know it's getting buried. Social justice, yeah, the stuff you need to know about. Walking